This is Dr. Mariah White, host of Your Life Matters. Thanks for listening to the following broadcast on Public House Media.
This is Julianne Condia, host of Rewritten, here on Public House Media. Thank you so much for listening to the following broadcast on Public House Media. Once you are done with this episode, I hope you'll come check out my show, Rewritten, where we will talk about you having limitless potential and can rewrite your story at any time. No matter your background, your past, or current situation, you can have the type of life you crave. A new show comes out every single Monday. Don't forget to subscribe on iTunes so you never miss an episode of Rewritten. Thanks again for checking out the following broadcast on Public House Media.
Welcome to Beauties and Headcanons, where we're nerdy and you probably are too. This is Emily, and I'm here today with Lindsay and Elisabeth, and we're here to talk nerdy to you. It's our anniversary episode, because as of August 1st, we have been a podcast for a whole year, which is super awesome. I kind of can't believe it. But I'm super thankful to everybody who's been listening this whole time. And I'm super thankful for Lindsay and Elisabeth, who came on the show back in like late January, early February, because they've been such great additions. But anywho, thank you to everybody. Thanks to Public House Media for making the show possible. We're just super happy that we've made it a year. I've learned a lot within this whole year, and we're looking to do more with the show. So keep listening. We're really, really excited.
Now, before we do begin, I just wanted to give a quick shout out to Squadcast, who is sponsoring this episode. As podcasters who all live in different states and a lot of times different time zones, one of the most important things when we record is the quality of our audio together, since we all record remotely. Current solutions like Skype, which we have used in the past, and Zoom are more dependent on internet quality. And Squadcast is just a simple browser-based tool that requires no additional software to install. The audio is just recorded locally as a high-quality WAV file, and then it's uploaded to the guest computer once you're done. We've been using them for a few weeks now, and we absolutely love the experience. If you want to get started, you can go to squadcast.fm for your 14-day free trial. That's squadcast.fm for free 14-day trial.
We are here today to answer your questions, because we've got some questions that were submitted by our listeners, and we've got some from Twitter, we've got some from Facebook, and we're going to go ahead and answer them. Here we go. Our first questions that we're going to answer are from Twitter. Some of them we've decided to answer each one of us, and others we've decided that one of us is going to answer only, and then we'll just go from there. So our first question is there a character or show that you like that you'd say is a guilty pleasure?
Okay, so I'm going to start off because my guilty pleasure is like a genre of shows. Every time that a baking show comes on Netflix, my daughter and I end up like binge watching it, something fierce. So there was Cupcake Wars a couple years ago. I don't think it's on there anymore, but we just fell in love. We would sit there and pop popcorn and just watch these shows of people baking these amazing cupcakes.
For my guilty pleasure, I know this will seem really weird to a lot of people, because as much as I push, good writing and good quality as far as, the art that you consume, my guilty pleasure is pretty much the opposite of this. And that's The Room by Tommy Wiseau. And I know it's terrible. I honestly could not even watch the whole thing just in one sitting, because I was scared that I was going to get like brain cancer or something because it's so terrible. It's awful, you guys. But, like the more I watched it, the more I was exposed to it, the more it was kind of entertaining, and it kind of like transcended its awfulness and became like absolutely hilarious. I'm not even sure how it happened or when it happened, but now I'm always like quoting The Room with my husband. So,
it's one of those Napoleon Dynamite things where it's like, this is just so bad, it's hilarious.
Exactly.
Yeah. Oh, that's funny. It reminds me of this one like martial arts movie that was really terribly dubbed over, I think as a joke, but I'm not sure. I haven't seen The Room exactly, but I know it's like ridiculous and that sort of thing. It makes me think of Kung Pao though. I've seen it like one time, but my husband thinks it's hilarious, and my father-in-law is into watching like all these B movies that are so terrible they're funny. You know, so I feel like it's kind of like that, where it's the terribleness draws you in, and yeah. But that's not my guilty pleasure. My guilty pleasure is actually a couple of shows. One of them is Altered Carbon, which just started on Netflix this past winter, I want to say, based on some books that are technically in the sci-fi genre, but they're also like sci-fi mystery detective type stuff. But they're also very mature content wise, which is totally kind of a new thing for me as of the last couple of years. I personally am just, I need a buddy to watch that kind of stuff. I can't do it by myself. So Altered Carbon is one, and then also Game of Thrones. I've been won over.
Finally.
I know. I'm like, like a little bit scarred, but also a little bit like, whoa, this is really good, like content.
I just thought of something though too. There was a couple of years ago, you got me trying to sit down to watch Gilmore Girls. Do you remember that? We watched 3 episodes.
Yes.
And I was supposed to take Aurelia home like at 5, and I was still at your house at 9 p.m. And that would totally be a guilty pleasure. Like I could totally see the 3 of us sitting down and watching that. That could be very dangerous.
Yes. That was a guilty pleasure for me. Like during the summer between the 2 years I was teaching, I was home and I had my daughter. She was like 2.5. And so I just binge watched that. All right. Next question. We have Elisabeth answering. What is your favorite episode of Star Trek: The Next Generation, and why is it the Inner Light?
Well, I think it's so hard to sometimes pin down favorite episodes because you might narrow it down to maybe 1 or 2, but then you think of, but this episode, but then this other episode was so good too. So, whenever I talk about favorite episodes, I never really specify how many. Yeah. I always say it's one of my favorite episodes, and The Inner Light is definitely one of my favorite episodes of Star Trek: The Next Generation. And I think it's because just the writing kind of, it's a little bit different. And when you get shows like, Star Trek, shows that are a little bit more long-term, or they kind of tackle usually, certain subjects, their episodes kind of get formulaic. And that's not necessarily a bad thing if the formula works. But, once in a while, it's really nice to have an episode thrown in where it's not quite like the others. And I think that's part of what makes The Inner Light stand out as well, along with the good writing, because, it's kind of atypical a little bit of what you might normally expect a Star Trek episode to be, So I think that's part of what makes it good.
That makes a lot of sense, actually, especially with something like Star Trek shows, because you can tell at watching them, they do have a formula. And the formula is a great formula, because once it works, stick
Obviously
with it.
It works.
Yeah, but it is cool to have that the slight change, and it just kind of makes you that much more interested.
Oh, yeah.
All right, so another question that we have, also Star Trek related, is who wins, the Borg or the Daleks?
That's kind of difficult. It would be a bit drawn out, I think, but I think the Borgs would ultimately overtake the Daleks. And the reason is because Daleks are more about conquering and destroying. Mm-hmm. And the Borgs, obviously, they want to conquer, but they want to integrate. They want to overcome, adapt, and integrate everything that they conquer into who they are. Right. So I think the first time that they finally take over a Dalek and they access that little hive mind that the Daleks have, it would probably be over. Because that's all that they need. Because any kind of advantage that the Daleks might have at that point is gone.
That's right.
Right, it would have integrated. Okay, so wait, what about Cybermen versus Borg?
That's a good question, because you're right. The Borg are all about assimilation, but so are the Cybermen.
Right. So are the Cybermen.
Right.
They would probably merge into one collective.
You know what? We'd have Borgermen. I don't know. That would be Borg versus Cybermen would be a really interesting one. Borg versus Cybermen, listeners, hit us up on that one. What about species 8472 versus Daleks?
Now, I had to look this up because it looks like that particular species was featured a little bit more in Voyager, which is one of the Star Trek series that I'm not as familiar with. But even in the Star Trek wiki that I was reading up on, they even put them slightly above the Borg. Whoa. So if I think the Borg will beat the Daleks, I don't think the Daleks have much of a chance against the species 8472.
Yeah. I don't remember what species 8472 is exactly, but
this very kind of mysterious species, and basically more or less it exploits a species' weakness in order to, destroy them.
Okay. I could see them taking, Daleks' weakness would be that they have no emotion, and they could take that and make that, and turn that against them.
Because, the Doctor has used that. So,
yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Okay. How about a question just in general? Of course, we should all listen to Beauties and Headcanons every week, because what else are you doing right now, guys? Right? But what other public house media shows would we recommend listening to? Now, I'm going to take this one because I actually have a couple that I think our listeners would really enjoy due to the content of them. One of them is How to Write Good by Daniel Poppy. It's the writing podcast that's not about writing. It's about the philosophy of writing and the psychology of writing. And it's less about the putting words on paper and more about thinking about how to write and how to approach writing, which is awesome. And he also has a few episodes about obsession and fandoms and the psychology of all of those things. And then his hilarious, sarcastic humor and dry humor sprinkled in there too. And then he's got some episodes about the science fiction genre and how it's really difficult to define. And it really is actually difficult to figure out, what is considered sci-fi versus not sci-fi and the subgenres inside of sci-fi. It's kind of crazy. So How to Write Good. And then also the Greg and Dave show, I recommend, because it's the weird news that you didn't know you needed to know, which is just great. So the Greg and Dave show, they talk about just miscellaneous stuff. They tend to weirdly talk about birds in their episodes, whether a lot of them are dead birds, but some of them are alive as well. There was one story they talked about a missing flamingo from the zoo. And apparently it's been living in the wild for a few years, and they found this wild flamingo from the zoo in a completely different state. Other topics like a pickle jar that had its own Facebook page, and just the weird news you didn't know you needed to know. So those are the two shows I would recommend: How to Write Good and the Greg and Dave show from Public House Media. All right, another question. Anybody can feel free to tackle this question. Why does the Federation bother with the Prime Directive at all if they're just going to ignore it half the time? Really, though.
Well, I think they put down the Prime Directive as more of a guideline that they kind of, in perfect situations, it should be followed all the time. But, I think most of the time they recognize that there are not always going to be perfect situations where everything is cut and dry. And so they kind of train their officers and their leadership to, have the discernment to see, okay, well, if this is a situation where I can deviate safely from the Prime Directive and not, just mess everything up. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think so. They have to have some kind of standard to go by, but then at the same time, they have to make judgment calls.
Yeah, and I don't think they want all of their leadership to just be, robots that aren't going to, be able to make human decisions in the heat of the moment. Because, that's kind of the heart of Starfleet is, being human. Because that's such a huge part of Starfleet, even though they have, other planets, join the humans are like one of the bigger parts of it.
Well, basically, if there was no deviation, there'd be no show, right?
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Like, if they always followed the Prime Directive, there would be nothing to show in Star Trek.
Right. That's what makes an interesting show, is the humanism of it. So
exactly. I think it
totally get it.
Yeah, I think it gives the show. Well, part of the theme of the show itself is that, like, there are rules, but there are circumstances in which they should be broken. And we're going to show you them. Yeah, and exploring like why that is and what to do, and like all of the Star Trek scenarios, like those don't exactly happen in real life the way they happen in Star Trek, but they can be applied in a lot of different scenarios. So I can see it. I hope we don't have to define what the Prime Directive is for anybody.
Nah, let's make it a mystery.
If you don't know what the Prime Directive is, just type in Prime Directive Star Trek and you'll find it.
Oh yeah.
I'm sure there's probably a specific, like, if you type it into Google, it'll give you like one of those little rectangles that says exactly what the Prime Directive is.
Probably.
Yeah. Alrighty. Next question. Who wins, the Doctor or Q?
Now, this, I think, depends on the certain circumstance of why they are going against each other. Because I think in like a normal circumstance, Q would just be so amused with him, he would intentionally lose just because, that means that he can keep playing.
Yes.
But I think if they were put in a situation where, they actually have to use everything that they have against the other, Q would wipe the floor with the Doctor and pretty much everybody.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think if it was just a random like encounter, and the Doctor saw Q as a threat somehow, like the Doctor would be working really, really, really hard to get rid of Q, or to like get Q taken care of. And he would probably think that he got it done, not completely understanding that Q is this big entity that doesn't necessarily follow all of the rules. I mean, and I think to a certain degree, the Doctor might realize some of that, but not exactly what the full extent of Q, like, because Q is this big continuum that it's not a temporal thing. It doesn't follow anything that temporal beings really realize. And the Doctor is a temporal being to a certain extent. He can count his age in Earth years, so
it would be really interesting to see them interact.
It really
like
would.
In capacity.
Yeah, I would definitely watch that. For sure. Okay, another question from another Twitter question. This listener says, I love the Voyager episode Year of Hell, but I also kind of hate it because at the end I feel like I wasted my time watching it, because even in Voyager's universe, everything I just watched didn't actually happen. Am I nuts for feeling this way? I don't think so, actually. I don't think you're nuts at all, because it's happened in a lot of other shows too in the sci-fi genre, where like something will happen and they'll either go back in time to undo that thing, or they'll do something in another dimension and then come back to their dimension, and it didn't matter what they did because it didn't affect their dimension at all or anything like that. But it's fine. I think it's totally justified to really love the episode, because what happened in that episode, it's all about the story, and the fact that the viewers and the cast and characters all went through that together. Just, it helps develop the relationships among the characters. It helps develop the show's storyline. And even though it didn't actually happen in the actual universe that the episode was supposed, or that the show happens in regularly, like I think it's more about the bonding. #bonding moment. Like, I think that's what it's more about. Not necessarily whether it actually happened or not. Like, because if the characters don't remember it, then it is really pointless.
Yeah, I understand that, because I mean, honestly, it happens in comics so much.
Oh, sure.
Like, they retcon things. It gets so frustrating. So, yeah, I definitely understand, because when they fairly recently retconned the fact that Magneto is the father of Scarlet Witch and Quicksilver.
What?
And that, yeah, because he was their father for like the longest time, like pretty much from the beginning, and now all of a sudden he's not.
Oh.
And that basically like makes the whole House of M arc where Scarlet Witch says no more mutants and the mutant population is decimated, that basically makes that whole thing completely pointless.
Yeah.
It's just so frustrating.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah, I definitely can identify with that.
Gotcha. Yeah, I didn't even shows how much I know about X-Men and that whole story arc thing. I didn't realize that that was a thing. All right. Another question from a listener's mom. Now that Harlan Ellison has passed, do you think the last Dangerous Visions compilation will ever be published? Because currently there are 2 compilations published, Dangerous Visions and Dangerous Visions Again. And then the next one is supposedly supposed to be called The Last Dangerous Visions. It's hard to say a lot of times in a row. Dangerous Visions.
They sound like not real words the more you say. I know.
Yes, that's totally true. But they are compilations of sci-fi works that Harlan Ellison started compiling in like the 60s or so, and he published some in like the late 60s and other in the early 70s or something like that. And the last Dangerous Visions was supposed to have been published. He started it and said it was like close to being done, I guess, ish in like the 70s. So it's been like over 30 years. Will it ever get published now that he's passed away?
It really depends on, I think, how much he has compiled and like, you know, how close he really is to finishing it. Because I can tell you this as a writer, when a writer says that they are almost done with something, they either are literally almost done with it or they haven't even started. So I mean, when he says that that it's almost been finished for almost 30 years, I kind of wonder if he was, you know, just saying that to kind of belie any questions.
I don't know. Well,
I mean, it is nearly almost finished. I mean, I would think that, you know, somebody like either one of his publishers or agents or something could at least piece together what he has and publish it for him.
Yeah. Well, and I was reading that he had solicited stories from people and supposedly paid them or something. So he had stuff. But
it's just how much.
How much of it did he have? And were those...
How organized is it?
Yeah, how organized, how did he intend on putting it together?
Yeah.
I don't know. It's possible.
I mean, I just finished my Camp NaNoWriMo goal for... reading and plotting and taking notes for 60 hours. I actually ended up with 61 hours.
Nice.
And I have 40 pages of notes.
Wow.
That's a lot.
Yeah.
And I think that if somebody read through those notes, they would be able to figure out and piece together a story that I wanted to tell.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe not necessarily in my voice, but I mean, they could still like put a lot of it together. So,
okay.
Yeah, I mean, it just depends on how much is there.
That's fair. Okay, so it might be if there's enough to put together, and
if
there's enough like interest, which apparently there's a lot of interest from the people that are familiar with the compilations that are already out.
Yeah, I would think so. Yeah.
So yeah, I guess our conclusion is it's possible, but it just depends on what's there.
Yeah.
Where do you think Supernatural is going story-wise, or how much longer will it run? Will they ever stop driving their fans nuts?
Well, to answer the last question, first, no, they will never stop.
I had a feeling that would be the answer.
that's part of their SOP right now, their standard operating procedure. So they're never going to stop. How much longer will it run? I honestly have no idea. That depends on so many different factors, because there have been a couple of times already where it's been close, I think, to being canceled, and then it hasn't. So it just depends on how many times it will not get canceled. Still,
I guess, yeah.
Potentially, I mean, it could still run for 10 more years, but you just never know when they'll decide to axe it. So I think the CW is aware that it draws in a lot of people and that it's very popular. So I don't think that they'll axe it anytime soon.
Yeah.
But I mean, it's going to happen sooner or later. So
eventually.
And as for where the story goes, I mean, this next season, they've set up the alternate universe Archangel Michael as the big bad. and he's taken over Dean's body. So now that's going to be the big struggle to get Michael out of Dean's body. And I don't know if they're going to try to kill him or maybe banish him back to the alternate universe. I'm not sure what they're going to do. I mean, it would probably be best to get rid of him permanently if they can, but there's so many questions. And I think the crux of the season will probably rest more on the Dean versus Michael internal struggle, and, you know, maybe not quite as much on external. I'm not sure. I mean, maybe that's just wishful thinking, because I think that would be really interesting to watch. But as far as long-term, I mean, they've covered so many different things. I mean, one of the big things I think they have to address is how heaven is going to keep itself powered and running, because there are so few angels, and what they're going to do to solve that. And God still hasn't come back from his little sojourn with his sister. So, I mean, is he ever going to come back? I think that would be something interesting to address later on down the line, because, I mean, they did... spoilers for, obviously anybody who hasn't watched the season finale, but they have killed Lucifer. So, him as a big bad is off the board. I'm pretty sure like all of his knights and all of his princes are now dead as well. So,
okay,
who is running hell now?
That's going to be the next. That's going to be the next thing to tackle. It sounds like there's a lot of different ways the story could go then.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. I have a question for Lindsay. It wasn't specified that it's for Lindsay, but I think Lindsay would provide a wonderful answer for this one. You can bring back one show for one full season. Which one is it? Firefly, a David Tennant season of Doctor Who, or any Nicktoon of your choice?
Firefly's second season going to be with or without Serenity, the movie?
Oh, I see. That's a good question. Would it be immediately following the first season of Firefly, or would it be what happens after the movie Serenity?
Right.
That's a good question. I think you can pick.
Okay. And then my other question would be the same thing about the David Tennant season. Would it be...
You know what? With Doctor Who, it could be with the Doctor. It could just be insert another season of David Tennant somewhere into his other seasons. You know? I would really love another season of Firefly before the movie.
I agree. But at the same time, I want to see Reavers wreak havoc, and I want to see what happens after as well. So that's a real big talking point with me as to whether or not it would be after or before.
True.
And that's why I chose David Tennant over it, because I feel like I agree.
Okay. Yeah, we should talk about it on an episode, just a whole episode about that. Let's do it. Short story, I might have told this on the show before, but when I was done with the last episode of David Tennant's time as the Doctor, I missed the part where he regenerated into the Matt Smith Doctor, and then I watched the next episode of this next season, and I was really mad. I'm like, where did David Tennant go?
Canned him?
What happened? Why is this guy with no eyebrows the Doctor?
Okay.
No, I knew that he was coming.
Gotcha.
I just didn't know how anything got there. Like, I knew that Matt Smith was coming. I knew that he was the next Doctor. But I had no idea how he went from David Tennant to Matt Smith. I was really upset about it, too. I hated the beginning of the Matt Smith season because I was salty about not getting the transition. Don't take away my David Tennant without telling me. All right, next question. A listener from Twitter would like to know if all of us could be any character of the opposite gender from any fandom. Which one would we choose and why? Okay, I like this.
Me too.
I've thought about it a little bit, not a whole ton. Before the question was asked, I had thought about it a little bit. But now that the question has been posed, I think I'd have to go for Wash from Firefly. I just think it would be super awesome to get to fly Serenity around. And if I were a guy, I would definitely be okay with being married to Zoe.
You would.
And my husband totally agrees. Oh yeah, I mean, who wouldn't be? Zoe's pretty much gorgeous and like awesome. But my husband also agrees. He's like, yeah, you're basically Wash in real life. I'm like, really? Okay, I'll take that. like a big compliment. Okay. Wash is fantastic.
I think if I had to pick just one, I would probably pick Castiel because, like you, I am pretty much like Castiel a lot in my real life. And so it wouldn't really be that much of a transition. I would just have to get used to the powers and everything.
Sure. I could see that, yeah. I don't know Castiel very well, but just, the getting used to I'd have to get used to flying a firefly. I'd have,
I
that.
think I'd probably be Captain America. I feel like this is very evident of our different fandoms because I like Emily, Firefly, Elisabeth, Supernatural. I suppose I'm kind of like the poster child for the Marvel universe. I just don't think I want to be a guy.
I know. I feel the same way. I'm like, I don't know how that would be. And speaking of representing our fandoms, the other fandom that I considered being from was Stargate. So I considered being Daniel Jackson from Stargate SG-1. So
and I also considered Jason Todd from DC. But then I'm like, well, I don't really want to die and then have to be reborn again. So I'd rather be an angel.
Yeah, I'd say that's a better choice.
Next question then would be for anyone. Whose death made you happy in any fandom? Hands down.
Okay, I'm going to take this because I was so happy in Game of Thrones when Viserys finally died. Like, oh my goodness. I was just so glad that the little turd was gone because he kept asking.
So satisfying.
It really was. It was a very satisfying death. And I'm not like super into like gore and stuff, but like
a crown for a king.
Yes. It happened so early too, didn't it? Wasn't that all in the first season?
It was in like, yeah. Either in the first season or the early second season. I remember
that. And I remember it being like,
Khal Drogo was, it was great. Also, it was Khal Drogo and Jason Momoa, so that helps. Well, and then also once Viserys was dead, like Daenerys stopped getting flack for her brother, essentially, and so she could finally go on and do her thing without having to worry about her turd of a brother.
Exactly.
So that made me so happy. Oh my god!
Ramsay's death in Game of Thrones was fairly satisfying. I kind of wish it was Jon who did it instead of Sansa, just because I really loathe Sansa, but otherwise, the means of his death was satisfying.
Yes, the means was very satisfying with Ramsay's death.
Stop talking about it. I don't know any of the details
anymore, but it was.
I promise I'll eventually watch it. So.
Okay. We'll hold off. We're done with that. That's good. But yeah. Lindsay,
do I have a death that made me happy in any fandom? I'm sure that I did. All the bad guys in any Marvel movie ever. All the time.
There we go.
I actually was really happy when Elektra died the first time. I am currently watching all of the Marvel Netflix shows. I am on The Punisher right now. So I am like actually getting really excited when those people die.
Okay, we've got a couple questions from our Facebook fans as well. So these ones that we just answered were all from Twitter. And now we're going to get into a few Facebook questions to answer. The following questions I'm going to ask kind of all go together in a way. So it starts off, have you ever considered reaching out for VIP type people that may help draw an audience as well as having some of your fans squeeing over excitement? And we have. We are just kind of working out the logistics of it right now and figuring out how to best approach those VIP guests that we could have. So, and also who we would want to reach out to too. I mean, it would be awesome to have any VIP guest on our show because even having been a show for a year, we've only had like basically people that we already know on as guests. And it would be really awesome to get somebody that is kind of a bigger name on the show. I would be really excited about that.
Yeah, definitely. And I think now since we've been, making shows for a year, that kind of says a little bit more to anybody we would have on as a guest, because, okay, well, the show has some longevity to it.
Yeah, we're a stable show. We have consistent episode releases, and it is exactly. We have stability now.
It's a bargaining chip now.
So, and we have Public House Media and the fans to thank for that, because if we didn't have listeners, I don't know what we'd do. So thanks everybody for listening. And then to follow that up, what does the future hold for Beauties and Headcanons? What stars are you reaching for in terms of what you want the show to become? That is also a fantastic question, because why else? Or, as a show, we've been going for a year. So what's the next step? Like, for me personally, I've been hosting the show for this whole year. And for me personally, I was just trying to get to the first year until now. So like, we're kind of exploring what our options and what our goals are. And when I just thought of this one, like, I think it would be super cool to just be out and about, living my own regular life, to see like a random Beauties and Headcanons swag out there in the wild.
Yeah. Yeah, that'd be cool.
That would be super awesome. So I'd love to see that. Or, just to encounter somebody that has at least heard of or has listened to an episode. I think that would be just kind of satisfying to know that somebody I don't know personally has listened to the show. And, they just had heard about it.
That'd be cool too.
I think that would be cool. Another Facebook question. Why do you love being a nerd? What a great question.
Well, I think being a nerd is really just kind of enjoying what you enjoy, and, just being fully committed to the experience of loving what you do. No matter what that is, no matter what fandom you're in, no matter what you're interested in, I think that's what really being a nerd is about. And, along my own journey of self-realization and, finding out who I am, when I was younger, I wasn't really allowed to express so much excitement or enjoyment over certain things. And so now it's like, I really want to, express myself even more, because, kind of just to make up for that. And also just to kind of just be as genuine and true to myself as I can. It's just a part of who I am.
That's awesome. Yeah. Well, kind of similarly for me, like, I love being a nerd because I can be excited about it. And you get to connect with a lot of other people that are also nerds too. It's kind of funny. Like, when we lived in Milwaukee, we just noticed bumper stickers on cars and stuff. And I noticed this one band that had a TARDIS and some Daleks on the back window, kind of like a family. And I was like, oh, cool, they're nerds too. Turns out, like, we actually met them a couple years later, and they're like our best friends now. It's crazy. Like, we didn't even know who they were. And then we found out that was their vehicle after we met them. And we're like, what? We had lived in the same town and like followed each other around on a road for a while, and now we know who you are.
Well, kind of in a similar vein, I met my husband in a geek group on Facebook. We just started, talking back and forth. We friended each other, and our relationship just progressed from there. And now we're married and we have a kid.
All right, a couple more, and then we'll be out of questions. But we've got a lot of questions, guys. This is awesome.
Yeah.
All right,
we're so excited.
Yeah. It's
extra long anniversary episode.
It's fantastic. All right, a couple questions then. What was your favorite Saturday morning
Batman
cartoon?
the animated series.
I have to say Bugs Bunny. I loved Bugs Bunny growing up.
It's always going to be my choice. Close second was the X-Men animated series, but Batman the animated series is just a classic for me.
Yeah, I always loved. I always loved Bugs Bunny in the mornings. I don't even know if it was a Saturday morning or not.
We've done an episode where I talked about Tailspin and Darkwing Duck.
Oh yeah.
Yes.
Let's get dangerous.
DuckTales. So basically all of that. But I'm pretty sure those were afternoon cartoons.
They might have been. I have no idea. All right. Next question. Who's the bigger jerk, Bugs Bunny or Cyclops?
Cyclops. And the question of who is the bigger jerk and Cyclops is one of the options. It's always Cyclops.
I'm not familiar with Cyclops. I know Bugs Bunny can be a jerk to people, but it's usually funny, at least.
And he's usually only a jerk when people like come and mess with him. Like, you know, if you leave him alone, like he'll just, you know, go on his way and he won't really do anything.
Exactly.
But it's when people mess with him that he, you know, that he's a jerk. But Cyclops is just a jerk all the time.
All right, next question. Since DeLoreans are discontinued, what vehicle would you use to make a time machine?
Oh boy. I have to take this one and say Dodge Challenger Hellcat because they're epic and I love them.
I can't disagree with you. So
yeah.
What was the stipulation that it has to get up to 88 miles per hour?
88.
That's not that big
a
stipulation.
Easily. No, it's really not actually, but
well, yeah. I mean, it's how it works. So, I mean, obviously it needs to.
My current car
not work
able to do it. So,
but okay. What this can be for any of us. What geek movie do you wish was never made?
I have one, and it's probably not one that people would think I would say because, you know, I always say we don't acknowledge Avatar: The Last Airbender, the live action movie. But I would, because we don't, that does not exist. But I would actually say I wish that the live action Spawn was never made. And the reason is because, you know, unfortunately it was made, I think, about a year before Blade came out. And since it was released about, you know, a year before Blade, it is technically the first major black superhero movie. And so it's like, really? We got to have that as the first black, you know, major superhero movie. It's awful. It's terrible. You know, if they had just waited for Blade, then we could say, oh, Blade, you know, because Blade is, you know, Marvel. And so obviously, you know, he's a major comic book character. So, yeah. So I would wish for Spawn to be unmade.
Okay. I would probably go with Aragon, the movie, though I personally haven't seen it. I've heard from enough people not to watch it.
I actually enjoyed it. But then again, I never read the books, so that's probably why.
Okay. That's probably why. Because the books are very good, but they are very similar to, like, it's kind of a cross between Lord of the Rings and, like, yeah, it's very...
High fantasy.
It's very inspired by high fantasy, but the guy that wrote it was like 16 when he wrote it, so it was not as deep as it could have been. Yeah. Which is also why it became so popular, is because he was so young when he wrote it.
Yeah, true.
Which is awesome and good for him. But at the same time, like, if he had more maturity and life experience and all of that, I think it could have become a much richer story. But then the movie just apparently did not do the books justice at all. And just, it's kind of like Avatar: The Last Airbender, the live action movie. We just kind of
it doesn't exist.
We don't talk about that. Right. All right. Next question. What fictional geek snack do you wish was real and available for purchase? Now, I would say anything from Harry Potter, but some of those actually are real and available for purchase at Harry Potter, The Wizarding World of Harry Potter. So, and I have had some of them, and they're delicious. So I can't say that they're not real because they're there.
Yeah, I don't know.
Both of my... Go ahead.
I don't have anything. I feel like I would just drink butterbeer until I was fat.
There you go. It's good. Just
yes, exactly.
World of Harry Potter,
I mean, I'm clearly just not shopping in the right places.
Yeah. Well, it's just I'd be interested to try any of the stuff that they made in Star Trek Voyager, because they were in a different like sector of the universe, and so they had zero access to anything from Earth. So unless they wanted to eat replicator food the whole time, which they did not because they didn't have the resources for that the whole time, they had to like scavenge from all these alien planets, and they got, what was his name? Shoot, I forgot his name from Voyager. The guy that ended up being the cook on the ship. So he was familiar with the stuff from that area, the Gamma Quadrant, right? Delta? Gamma Quadrant?
I really need to watch more Voyager.
It's good. And so they picked him up along the way, and he became their chef because he was familiar with all the vegetation and animal life, so he knew what was good and what wasn't. And I really would be curious to find out what it all tasted like.
That is interesting. Both of mine are from the same fandom, from the world of Fallout, and probably my number one is Nuka-Cola, because I want to know what Nuka-Cola tastes like. I kind of picture it kind of like an RC cola, maybe. But I kind of just want to taste it for myself. I think they did release like some special edition Nuka-Cola Quantum around Fallout when they released Fallout 4. But I think it was just like a limited edition. And it's like, I want the original Nuka-Cola. And then the second one, I would want the box of Fancy Lad Snap Cakes from Fallout. Just because I like the name. I think it sounds really neat. And I want to know what they taste like.
Oh, I just thought of this also. Sweet cakes from Skyrim, because they are everywhere.
Yeah, the sweet rolls.
Sweet rolls. Sorry, sweet rolls. Sweet rolls
the
from
boiled
Skyrim.
Cream treats look really good too. The boiled cream treats.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. I mean, okay, if you're going hunting in Skyrim and you kill a wolf that has sweet rolls on it,
do you really want those sweet rolls?
How?
How bad would
I don't know. Sometimes they have gold
and jewelry.
Where do these animals get this stuff?
Yeah,
they'll have crystals or something
that way.
I would guess so. Yeah, but still,
maybe they were wearing necklaces.
I thought about this a little too much, I think.
Yeah, right. They've got little pockets. Thanks for getting nerdy with us today. Talk nerdy to us. Find Beauties and Headcanons on Facebook, Twitter, and Tumblr to share your nerdy topic suggestions. Subscribe to this podcast and others from Public House Media on iTunes, Spreaker, iHeartRadio, and wherever good podcasts are found.
We love feedback, so if you liked this episode, or even if you didn't, please give us a rating and a review so that we can keep making great episodes for you. I'm Lindsay.
I'm Elisabeth.
And I'm Emily, and thanks for getting nerdy with us on Beauties and Headcanons.